This is a video on how to find your female voice. It's written primarily for male to female transsexuals who are interested in the option of stealth. But I think that it can have use for all sorts of other people in the gender community. So I'm offering this up as a little step-by-step instruction, and I'm excited that you're going to try this with me. I think that you may learn something. First off, I want to thank you for purchasing this. I'm really excited about this project. And second, I want to ask, please do not make copies of this. This is how I pay my rent, and this is how I subsidize my free websites for the community. Also, if you happen to be looking at a borrowed copy of this, I hope you'll consider sending along some money if you found this useful. I'll show an address at the end of this video where you can send some money, or you can donate electronically through my website, tsroadmap.com. There's two things that you're really going to need to do this. One is time. It's going to take some effort. You're not going to learn this by the end of this tape. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's like a musical instrument or a foreign language. You can't just pick it up and play perfectly. It's going to take practice, about an hour a day for a few months. But if you can set that aside, you're going to do really well. On the other side of that coin, when you're first starting, don't go crazy and overdo it, because it's very easy to strain your throat. You're using muscles in a way that you haven't before, so it's almost like running a marathon. You can't go out the first day and run an entire marathon. You have to work your way up to it. So if you're doing these exercises and you start to feel like your throat is getting sore, just take a rest, slow down for a little bit and just work your way up. It'll just keep you moving forward without having problems. The second thing that you need is a microcassette recorder. These are really easy to find at most consumer electronics stores. I think I got this one at Radio Shack. It was pretty inexpensive. Try to get the kind that have an audible rewind that kind of goes, because that just allows you to hear where you are on your tape a little easier. The other thing that can be helpful is one with a counter, and if you think that you're going to be using it a lot, which I hope you will, you might consider getting a wall attachment, a little, I think 8 or 9 volt wall attachment, so that you can save batteries. Also, if you think you're going to be using one of these in your car, you should probably consider getting one of those lighter attachments that allows you to use it that way. If you do think for some reason you're going to need to use it with batteries, you might consider investing in some rechargeable batteries with a little recharger kit. I also want to talk about a couple of things you don't need. You do not need musical ability to do this, although it can be very helpful. We're actually going to go through a few musical sorts of things for those of you who may be able to get it more easily that way, but it's certainly not necessary. This is really about feel more than being able to sing or something like that. The other thing that you don't need is a lot of fancy diagnostic equipment. I know some people are really interested in finding out the frequency of their voice, or looking at it on a computer spectrogram, but that kind of stuff is not necessary. This is really something qualitative about your voice and not quantitative. So those things can be helpful. In fact, if you think that would be useful for you, I've got a couple of websites that you can look up for software that'll let you do that on your computer. The next thing I'm going to do, I kind of agonized over whether I was going to put on this video or not. I'm going to do some examples of where my voice used to be, because I think that it'll inform and inspire you and show you that you can do this too, because I started with a pretty masculine voice. None of this has been digitally altered. I can't prove that to you, but you got to take my word for it. This is all real. This is in camera. We haven't done anything to this. The first thing I'm going to try to do is a glissando from my current voice down through my range. So let me just get a big breath. As you can see, there's quite a range there.
Okay, I'm going to present several other voice samples, but I'm going to take the picture off because I don't really feel comfortable having my image associated with these sounds. But just to help you, here they are.
The next thing I want to try to do is my old voice. And this is something that's actually kind of difficult for me to do because it's been a while. And it sounds really strange to me now and it feels even weirder. So let me give it a try. Uh, this is the voice I used to use. It sounds really croaky and strange in my own head right now because it's been so long since I used it. Uh, the next thing I'm going to try to do is sort of this exaggeration of how deep my voice could be. Uh,
This is Rockin' Johnny on WSRS Chicago.
as you can see, it's like it was a pretty masculine voice and pretty deep and pretty full, and I was able to get to this point. The last thing I want to show you is that once you have these muscles under your control and you understand what makes them move, you can actually switch in the middle of a sentence and then go back to your female voice, if you want to. I know, why would I want to, though? So that's sort of my range. That felt really weird, but I hope that this was helpful. Now, there are a few strategies that people use to make their voices sound more female, which sometimes actually aren't that successful. And I want to talk about a few of those so that you can kind of hear the problems in them and, possibly, avoid those common pitfalls. The first voice I'm going to try to do is a sort of Mrs. Doubtfire type. And it's kind of comical because it's a standard kind of voice that a man does in a movie or whatever when he's trying to pretend like he's a woman. And it's got this kind of forced sound, and I think you'll sort of hear what I'm talking about.
Hi, I'm trying to sound like a woman, but I ended up sounding very forced and very kind of snooty or something.
The next voice is, I call it the Minnie Mouse voice. And it's caused by people who are using a falsetto voice. And we'll talk more about falsetto in a little while. But the voice is really pinched because they're up in their register into a very forced point. And it kind of sounds like this. Hi, I'm just talking in my falsetto voice, and I sound like a cartoon character. This next voice I call the witch voice or the croaky voice. It's what's happening here is the person is almost getting rid of all the tone in their voice and just using this sort of creaking, croaky sound. Let me give you a little example. Hi, how are you? This is kind of the way that some people try to talk because it sounds really pinched and forced, and sometimes they just kind of whisper like this, and it just doesn't sound realistic, does it? The next voice I want to talk about I call the drag queen voice, and this is characterized by a very sort of nasally sounding voice because they're pushing their voice up into their palate, and we'll talk about how they're doing this and how to avoid it in a minute. But it kind of sounds like this. Hey girl, you look fierce. Where did you get that dress? It's fabulous. The last one I want to talk about is a voice where I'm sure that they have difficulty on the phone because it sounds way too full and way too deep. Like, this is Debbie, and you can kind of hear how my voice, it sounds like I'm trying to do something, but it's still really too low. Since we live in a society where everything has been divided very sharply into either male or female, we're going to have to work with that model. But based on that, everything sort of runs along a spectrum between those 2 points. Some things are very masculine, some things are very feminine. And just like gender expression, which can be a balance of both. Like there's nobody who's like pure masculine or pure feminine. It's like everybody has a little bit of both in them. The same is true with your voice. All you're trying to do is change the balance so that more of your cues are feminine rather than masculine.
My mom used to say, "Don't use that tone of voice with me." And it's because we're constantly changing the tone of our voice. And it's so easy that you don't even think about it. All I'm going to do is show you how to change the tone of your voice so that it sounds more feminine. Once you understand how and you practice properly, it becomes just as easy as any other way that you change the tone of your voice. Now, as far as tone, the main characteristic of your voice is its tone, whether you're speaking or singing. So let's start there. Sound travels through the air in waves, and a tone is simply a sound that has a regular wave pattern. And there's three kinds of vibrations or patterns that affect your tone. The first one is your pitch, and that's the frequency of the vibration, which is measured in cycles per second or hertz. The more cycles per second, the higher the pitch. So in general, women's voices have a higher pitch, and men's voices have a lower pitch. So you see the difference, that it's that high-low thing. The next thing is the intensity or loudness, which is measured in decibels. And the third one is the biggest variable of the three, and that's the quality. It's also called the timbre, and some people call it the resonance, and I do too. I think that's a good way to describe it. It's measured by a bunch of complicated stuff, like your overtones or the prominence of your primary tone, but we don't need to get into all of that.
Now, I mentioned earlier that your voice is basically a musical instrument, and there's three basic components to your voice. The first one is your lungs, which is what pushes the air through your throat, which is the second part, your voice box, which is where the vibrations occur. And then the final part is your mouth, which is sort of like the horn of a trumpet, where it's like the shape of your mouth is going to change the way your voice sounds. So when we're doing these exercises, there's things that you need to keep in mind. You need to keep your shoulders up and back, and you want to breathe in deeply through your nose like this. And you see how that feels with your chest sort of pushed out? You want to sort of hold that position. That's how you want your lungs when you're practicing. As far as your throat, the main thing is to keep your chin up so that your throat can sort of move freely and you're not getting all pinched like this. So, keep your chin up and point it out. As far as your mouth, what you really want to do is a thing called lips together, teeth apart. And all that means is exactly how it sounds. You want to have about a finger's width worth of room between your upper and lower teeth. And then once you've got that established, just close your mouth, and at first it'll look like this, and then it'll settle. That's how you want to keep your mouth, because what that does is it maximizes your resonance out of your mouth and makes your voice louder so you don't have to strain your vocal cords as much. The next thing we're going to do is show you a couple of little slides of the vocal cords themselves.
The first diagram I'm going to show you as far as vocal anatomy is sort of a cross-section of your mouth. Now you can see the tongue is actually pretty big. We can only see a small part of it when we stick it out, and it goes way down into our throats. When you swallow, what happens is your tongue seals off your mouth by pressing up against your palate, which is the roof of your mouth. And then it forces all the contents of your mouth down your throat. Once you put your hand on your throat and swallow, and you'll be able to feel all those muscles sort of moving in unison. Now, down in your throat where you're feeling, there's actually two tubes. The one in the back that you can't really feel goes to your stomach and is called the esophagus. And the one in front, which is the one you can feel, goes to your lungs, and that's your trachea. To keep food and saliva from going into your lungs, there's this flap of cartilage called the epiglottis, and that covers up your air passage as you swallow. When you breathe in and out, the epiglottis moves up and out of the way. The next diagram shows the cartilage in your throat. On the left side is a front angle view, and on the right is a side cross-section so that you can see inside where your vocal cord is. The hard stuff that comprises your ears and nose are made of cartilage too. It's softer, more flexible than bone, but it's still pretty rigid. So this area in your throat that we're looking at that's made of cartilage is called your voice box or your larynx. If you squeeze your throat with your fingers, starting under your jaw and moving down towards your collarbones, you're going to feel all kinds of lumps and bumps and ridges in the cartilage. And that's because your larynx actually has several different pieces. You have all sorts of muscles and ligaments in that area that move these pieces of cartilage around. If you put your fingers on your throat and swallow, you'll feel everything kind of move. It's a really complex process, and you don't even think about it usually. What we're going to do is look at ways that we can get that muscle to be more under our control. The thyroid cartilage, if you'll look on the chart, is the biggest piece, and that's the one that sticks out the most, and it's usually known by its common name, the Adam's apple. When you get a trachea shave to reduce the size of your Adam's apple, that's what the surgeon is cutting away. Now the trick is your vocal cords are right behind there, so they have to be really careful not to damage those or do anything that's going to change your vocal cords, because that'll totally change the way your voice sounds. The last thing we're going to look at is a cross-section from inside your mouth looking down your throat at your larynx, and this actually shows the vocal cords themselves. On the left there's a diagram, and on the right is a photo from the same angle. If you can see down at the bottom is the tongue and the epiglottis, and directly above them are your actual vocal cords. And there are these two identical sort of grayish muscles that stretch across your air passage, and they vibrate when air moves through your trachea. And you can actually see in the diagram that there's a little space where the air is coming through. These muscles can completely close together and seal off your air passage due to these vestibular folds that connect the vocal cords to the walls of your larynx. Most of the sounds that you can make are caused by using these muscles to change the shape of your larynx and to increase or decrease the tension of your vocal cords.
Now, unfortunately for us, testosterone actually thickens your vocal cords, which makes them vibrate at a lower frequency. So after you've hit puberty and your voice changed, that's when your vocal cords start to thicken. And once that's happened, it's irreversible. So unless you were lucky enough to get on anti-androgens before you were 12 or 13, you probably have irreversibly thickened vocal cords, like me. That means that, we just have to work a little harder to find the right voice. I also want to talk for a minute about voice surgery. Basically, there's a couple of procedures, and what they do is they attempt to raise the pitch of the voice by stretching those two white muscles we just saw. The idea being it's kind of like a guitar string. If you tighten it up, it makes it vibrate at a higher pitch. These procedures are generally not successful, and I do not recommend voice surgery. If for some reason you do decide to do it, it's not going to be a magic cure-all. You're still going to have to do exercises like this both before your surgery and after your surgery if you hope to have any success. This is not something where, you can just pop some pills or lie down on a table and have your voice magically corrected. This is going to take some practice. But I know you can do it. So with that, let's get into some lessons. For these, the first things I want to do is sort of familiarize you with the muscles that we just looked at in your throat. For these exercises, you're going to need a couple of things. One, go pour yourself a glass of water and, pause the tape and get that done. And the other thing you're going to need is a small vanity mirror if you have one. If you don't, you can just do this in your bathroom mirror and it'll be fine. The first series of exercises we're going to do are going to sort of help you feel where these muscles are that we're going to be working with. All of these exercises have no tone to them. In other words, you're not going to be making a ah sound or anything like that. It's all just going to be without tone. So the first thing I want you to try to do is yawn. And I know it's kind of hard to yawn on demand, but maybe if you watch me do it, it'll make you do it. And what you want to do is, as you're doing it, press on either side of your trachea. And you're going to feel that your entire voice box and trachea actually moves up and down as you yawn. Ready? And then you'll feel at the end when you swallow that everything is compressing together. Let's try that again. What's happening when you're yawning is you're actually opening your throat as far as it can go. if you were making a tone as you were yawning, it would be an ah sort of sound. It's like, in fact, if you did like this, hear how it sounds like an ah kind of sound? It's because your throat is so open that that's the only vowel sound that you can make at that time. Okay, what we're going to do with our mirror is we're going to look down into our throat just to sort of see what's going on. Now, you're not going to be able to see your vocal cords because you'd have to press down your tongue awfully hard to see all the way down that far. Your vocal cords are actually right about here in your throat, and that's a pretty long ways down. But you can see the top of the voice box contracting when you do higher notes and expanding when you do lower notes. So this can just help you sort of feel those muscles and understand what's happening when you change your pitch in your voice. So what we're going to do is look into the mirror, open our mouths as wide as we can, and press down on our tongue and just sort of watch what's happening in the back of our mouths as we do these notes. Ready? The next couple of exercises we're going to do are a little gross, but they help you to understand the mechanism that's going on in your throat. And it has to do with the way that we clear phlegm from our throats, because what you're doing when you're doing that is actually constricting your air passage in certain places, and it's that constriction forces the phlegm out of that area. So the first thing I want to do is just try clearing our throat a couple times. And you're going to hear me do it a few different ways, and I want you to try to emulate those, because if you clear your throat down low, it's at a very different place than when you clear your throat up high. And I'll show you right now. All of those you'll feel is actually happening in a different place in your throat. So just try a few of those with me, and just try to get a sense for where that's happening in your throat and the muscles you're using to constrict your throat in those places. So just try a few of those for a while, and then get back to me. What I want you to do is like almost pretend like you're getting, like a loogie up. So you're going to go like this. What that's doing is it's actually constricting your throat in a smooth pattern from the bottom to the top. And when you do it, you can actually feel all the muscles that we're going to need to be using. So even though it's gross, let's do it along. Ready? The next thing we're going to do, you'll need your glass of water for, because we're going to gargle. When you're gargling, what happens is you are using these muscles that we were just playing with to clear phlegm. And gargling helps soothe your throat because you're getting liquids to the top part of your throat as well as the bottom part of your throat by relaxing different muscles. And you'll feel it, I think, as we gargle. So we're just going to do this a few times. So let's just take a sip and gargle along with me. Ready? That was fun. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is a little exercise that involves some tone. We're going to be doing a G sound, and you'll notice that when you do a G, that it's way in the back of your throat. It's because you're using the very back of your tongue to seal your voice box for just a minute and then letting air out. And that's what makes that G sound. And if you do it in certain ways, as we're going to practice, you can actually feel the muscles that we're going to be playing with. So, when you say gift like that, it's up in your palate, like G, G, G. But we want to do G. And as you do it, you're going to try to open up your throat. So, it's like this. G, 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 G. And if you keep doing it, you can feel the difference between gift and G. Gift, G, gift, G, 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 G. And that's why when you're drinking, sometimes it sounds like G, 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 G. If you can make that sound, you're actually using the muscles that you need to work with. So let's try that. Ready? And you can hear how there's different feel to each one of those. We're going to go into some of that resonance stuff a little later, but that's just to help you feel those muscles. Okay, the next exercises we're going to do are breathing exercises. Because we're going to be breathing in and out a lot, it's important that you're sitting down for these. And if you start to feel lightheaded, just stop for a minute. Just, let yourself get back to normal. There's no reason to rush through these. Don't hyperventilate. Just take your time. The first thing we're going to do is blow with our hands in front of our face, because we're going to feel different ways that breath comes from our lungs. Your voice should be supported by your lungs. So we've got our shoulders back, chin up. We're going to breathe in deep through our nose, and we're going to blow on our hand like we're trying to cool some soup. Ready? And you feel how that's cold, right? Now we're going to do the same thing, except now we're going to try to warm our hand like it's a cold day. That's going to involve going. Now you notice when you do that the breath is very warm. And the reason is because you're pushing a lot of volume of air up through your lungs and through your throat, which is in a very open position. When you're going ah, that's why when you're at the dentist, they have you say ah, because you're opening your throat as wide as you can. So let's try that again. That's going to be really important for some future exercises. Okay? Okay, so now let's get a big deep breath, and we're going to do some things that are kind of like annoyed sighs. And you'll notice that there's different ways that you can do it. But the basic idea is this. Now, that one was actually pinched very much up at the top of my voice. Listen to the different ways that you can do it and try to follow along. Ready? And there's one that if you do it low enough, it almost sounds like you're running out of air like this. It's almost like you're coughing. What you're doing is you're expelling air from the deepest part of your lungs when you do that, and opening your throat as far as you can. So let's try that range again. That's using all those muscles supported by the breath that we want. Now I know that some of these may be a little hard to hear on the video, but if you're doing it, with your tape recorder, you may be able to hear what I'm trying to tell you. We're going to do some sounds, but with different vowel shapes using our mouths, because all we're doing when we change the shape of our mouths is that's how we create different vowels. So we're going to do a long E, a long I, and a long O with the So first we go breathe in deep and do it again. Ready? And you can feel your throat muscles actually changing, as well as the mouth shape. And that's what you really want to concentrate on, is really thinking about those. So try those again a few times, and then we'll get to the next lesson. The next thing we're going to try is an ow sound with the, but don't make a tone, so just go. And you'll feel, besides moving your mouth, try to concentrate on your throat and what's happening there. What you're doing is you're actually constricting the shapes and making different vowels. And without the tone, you can kind of feel it a little better. Okay, the next one that we're going to do is actually the most important of the non-tone sounds we're going to do. And that's an ah sound, but without the tone. So just go like this. And again, that ah sound forces you to open up your throat and use your full lungs. And that's the way we want our throat when we add tone, which is what we're going to do right now. This is going to sound really breathy at first, and that's okay. We're going to overcorrect it first. It's almost like when you learn a foreign language, you overpronounce the words at first, and then eventually get into the way that people normally speak. That's what we're going to do here. So we're going to add tone to our, but it's going to be really breathy. And the way we're going to do that to make sure that you're staying breathy is to hold our hands in front of our face so that we can feel that warm air hitting our hands. Ready? And what we're going to do is just add some tone, whatever tone you want. I'll do a pretty low one. Now you should actually feel the warm air hitting your hand. If you don't, then you're doing something too pinched. So let's just try a few more. Ready? Okay, this next part we're going to talk about has to do with the ha sound that we were just doing. If you're doing that sound and adding tone, there's a certain point in your voice as you go up where you can no longer hold that ha. And that's where you've reached what's called your falsetto. It's also called your break when you're singing. And what it is a point where you can no longer hold your natural resonance and your voice skips into another register where it's using a really pinched nasally sound. There's some popular singers that have used it, like the Bee Gees or Frankie Valli. I'll sing a little so you can kind of hear what it sounds like. Walk like a man, talk like a man. You see how it sounds kind of high? And then, the Bee Gees, it's like, you can't tell by the way I use my walk, I'm a woman's man. I don't know why all these falsetto songs have that man thing going in them, but they do, and that's why we want to avoid it.
What you're looking at now is several ways that you can express pitch, both musically and scientifically. Some of you who've had music lessons as kids or in school might find it easier to understand these concepts if they're presented in musical terms. So what we've done is we've presented you with the scale, notes on a keyboard, and then below that are numbers that represent scientific notation in hertz. I've also marked the approximate average and the pitch range for male and female with the blue and pink bars respectively. Now, if this is confusing to you, it's not necessary for you to understand these concepts, so don't worry. I include them here because some readers will better understand what they're trying to do if they see it this way. Everyone learns differently, so don't get hung up on this if it's not making sense. On the scale at the top, you'll see musical notes, which are those black dots, are placed in relation to two five-lined clefs, which tell the music reader which note to sing or play on their instrument. A scale is just a basic vocabulary of music, much like letters are the basic components of spoken language. In fact, they're so similar that music notes are assigned letters from A to G, after which they repeat. The top part shows an ascending musical scale, so the pitch gets higher as we move from left to right, and the notes go up. If you look at the scale, I've marked all the C's in bold to help you see the repeating pattern. The reason I chose C instead of the first letter A is because there's certain things about C that make all this easier to understand, and we'll get to that later.
Whenever you're looking at a keyboard, you can actually find a C on it pretty easily. All you have to do is look. The black keys are in groups of 2 and 3. All you want to do is find a group of 2. If you choose the left one of the 2, the next white key to the left is always a C. So, for instance, this is a C, and this is a C. Now, if you look at the way notes are arranged on the diagram in your booklet, you'll see that they're in ascending order up a scale. And a scale is just playing the notes in order up from an octave or going as far up as you want to. So it would be like this. And that's a scale, it's an octave scale. Now the distance between one C and another C is called an octave because there's 8 notes in between. Like for instance, if you want to hear what an octave sounds like, the first 2 notes from Somewhere Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz is an octave. So that's an octave. Basically, male voices are about an octave lower than female voices. So a male voice would be down here and a female voice would be up here. So all you're going to have to do is raise the pitch of your voice about an octave. Now if you look at the diagram in your booklet, you'll see that I've marked where male range is, which is approximately from about here all the way up through about here. Most males can work a range about that wide. Now, female range tends to go from about here up through here. So there's a little more range, and you can see that there's some overlap right in here. What we're going to try to do is get above that overlap a little bit. Now technically, the exact middle of male range, the average for males, is this note right here. That's about where most male voices resonate at. What we're going to try to do is get closer to the female range, and the exact average is this. You can see in your booklet that's marked as a pink note, and this is the A key that's just below middle C. Now what we're going to do during these exercises is actually use middle C as our reference point, and that's this note. We're going to overcorrect a little bit because it'll help you sort of stay up in this part of the range rather than dipping down into the overlap part.
Now, as far as the scientific notation, pitch is measured scientifically in hertz, or cycles per second. That means if a pitch is 220 hertz, there are that many up and down vibrations each second. Now, it turns out there's a lot of math found in music, too. So if pitch is half of the hertz, it's an octave lower. If it's twice the hertz, it's an octave higher. There's only about 1 octave difference between typical male and female voices. So wherever you are now, you probably just need to raise it about an octave. Now, average female pitch is about 220 hertz, which corresponds almost exactly with the A, that's 2 white keys below middle C. It's also the second lowest sounding string on a guitar or a cello. Now we're going to overcorrect a little bit and use middle C as our target note.
Now that we've looked at some musical stuff, we're going to play with our pitch, but we're going to try to find the place where your voice goes into your break or into falsetto. And the way we're going to do that is by using our ha sound. We're just going to go up a scale or do a couple other ways and see where your voice breaks into falsetto. So I'm going to show you how mine works, and then you can follow along. So just listen to this one. What I'm going to do is start, and then eventually you're going to hear it. I'll point to camera when that happens. Ha, 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 and you hear right there, it actually breaks into a place where I can no longer breathe out the way that I was and do that. Because you can't hold your voice box open like that and do a falsetto note. So that's your break. So we're going to do some exercises now to help you sort of find that point on your scale. We're going to do those with the keyboard first, and then we're going to do some other exercises in case you can't follow along with the music. The next thing, now that we've tried it with the scale, is just sort of like a siren effect, and this doesn't require any sort of musical skill or being able to sing along. You're just going to keep going up until your voice breaks. Now, you're going to need a big breath for this, and don't do a bunch of these in a row because you will get dizzy. So, take a deep breath and just listen to me on this first one, and then we'll do a few. Ready? Did you hear where my voice, I actually almost broke, and that's why they call it the break, because you can no longer maintain that full throat. So let's try a couple more of those and just sort of follow along. And just keep trying until you sort of find that spot. And then try to sort of hold a note just below your break. So I'm going to try a few now that are right below mine. Just keep sort of trying to feel where that is. Once you find it, then you'll know exactly the uppermost part of your vocal range. And that's sort of where you want to work from when you're speaking. You never want to go much above that, except in rare instances we'll talk about later. So for me it's right in that range. So just keep trying to practice on that range right through there. The next thing we're going to try to do is play with our resonance within our regular range. You can actually force your falsetto within your regular range by doing certain exercises. So let's try a few. The first thing we're going to do has to do with making an ah sound. Because when you do that, what you're doing is you're actually making your voice pinch right at the point where your falsetto happens. If you feel that, that muscle is exactly what we're going to be playing with. So if I hold that out, I get this. And you see how that sounds like kind of like a buzz or something, like a bug? What we're going to do is we're going to go from that into our ha. So if you listen, you hear a point where it goes from pinched to our full throat. Most people who have a bad female voice are doing their voice in this pinched part. So we're going to try to listen really carefully. Listen to me do it again. Ah. Do you hear the difference? That's what you're going to try to do. So let's try it along together. Ready? I'll do one, then you do one. Ah. Ah. I'm going to try a couple at lower tones too. Ah. Ah. And just let it trail off to breath. Ah. Ah. you know how when you make a creaky gate sound, it sort of has this sound like ear. We're going to do a little exercise with that now. What I want you to do is make that sound ear. Great. Now I want you to try to hold it on one note, just like this. And it doesn't matter what note. You could be lower. And then go like this with your breathy voice. And go back and forth between the two. In order to find the right resonance, what we're going to do is we're going to look for a place between those two exaggerations, between that pinched voice and the breathy voice, because the perfect voice that you want is right in between those two, so we just have to find the right mix. For this next exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to make an ah sound. We're going to go back and forth between our pinched voice and our breathy voice and vice versa. So first let's do our ah, very pinched and exaggerated, and into our breathy. Ah, 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 ah. The next thing we want to do is go the other direction. Start with our breathy and go to the pinched. Ah, 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 ah. The final thing we want to do with our ah sound is go from our pinched one into our breathy one without a break in between. So we're going to start pinched then breathy. Ready? Ah. So by the end you should feel your breath on your hand. Ah. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with the sound of E. So we start pinched and go to breathy. Ready? E. Now we're going to go the opposite direction and start breathy and go to our buzz. And finally we're going to go from our buzz to our breathy in one fell swoop. Ready? Great. Okay, for these next ones, if it still helps you to break in between your buzz and breathy voices, that's fine, but you don't have to. The first sound we're going to do is an A sound, long A. And we're just going to go from buzz to breathy without the break, unless you just want to practice. Ready? A. A. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with the long I. Ready? Okay. And the last one we're going to do is our O sound. Ready? O. So now that we know where middle C is, and we know that that's in the middle of the female range, it's going to be really helpful for you if you can keep that note in mind. So at the end of the tape, I'm going to play that note so that you have it as a reference. But you can also, just for portability's sake, get a harmonica or a tuning fork or there's these little round things that are kind of like harmonicas that a cappella groups use. You can get most of these at a music store. And all you just want to do is set it to C, and then just keep that middle C in your head, and use that as your bass note. Okay, we've been doing a few things with pitch now. The next thing I want to try to do involves chanting at a certain pitch. What that forces you to do is keep your pitch even as well as your resonance at the same time. So we're going to take our ha sound and apply it to other vowel and consonant combinations. So just repeat after me. I'm just going to do it with the ah set, but then we're going to have you repeat this with other vowels as well. And all we're going to do is just go through the alphabet and use each letter in front of this vowel. So in your booklet you'll find that there's a page with the alphabet listed. And just follow through and into your recorder do these sounds. Okay, ready? I'll do the ahs with you. Ah, ba, ka, da, ya, fa, ga, ha, ya, ja, ka, la, va, na, pa, qua, ra, sa, ta, yua, va, wa, xa, ya, za. So now I want you to do it with these other vowels, and I'll just let you go through them on your own. The first one I want you to do is O. O. Okay, now we're ready for ow. Ow. Ow.
All right, next up is R. R. R.
Okay, now we're ready for aw. Ha. Ha.
Okay, this next chart does the same thing but with tighter throated vowels.
Okay, next we're ready for add. Had. Had. Okay, our next vowel is A. A. Hey. Moving right along, we're ready for I. I. Hi. Almost done. The next one is E. E. He. Okay, and here's our last one. It's oo. Hoo. Hoo. Okay, this next section, what we're going to do is we're going to be chanting a mantra of ours. And it's just a simple sentence, and we're going to use it for a few different exercises. The sentence that I want you to use is, "This is the voice I want to use." So what we're going to do is we're going to chant it, and we're going to use our different voices. So we're going to start with our pinched voice. Ready? This is the voice I want to use. You want it nice and pinched like that. Let's do it again. This is the voice I want to use. Now we're going to do it in our breathy voice. Ready? This is the voice I want to use. Get a big deep breath. Ready? This is the voice I want to use. Great. Now we're going to switch back and forth in the middle of the sentence. So first, let's start with our breathy voice and move to our pinched voice. Okay? This is the voice I want to use. This is the voice I want to use. Okay, now we're going to go the opposite direction. We're going to start pinched and go to our breathy. Ready? This is the voice I want to use. This is the voice I want to use. Great. Okay, now we're going to do it. We switch mid-sentence. So we're going to start with our pinched voice, and by the end of the sentence it'll be breathy. Ready? This is the voice I want to use. Big breath. This is the voice I want to use. Okay, now that we've done those, what I want you to try to do is raise your pitch. So last time we were at, this is the voice I want to use. Try raising that a pitch to, this is the voice I want to use. And just keep trying to move up pitches until you get to places where it's harder and harder for you to do. And that's the way you're going to increase your range. So I'll let you practice those on your own and just try to work on your range. Okay, now that we've done lots of chanting of this is the voice I want to use, we're going to start saying it as a sentence. But I want you to keep it very sort of monotone at first. And then we're going to start adding in the sort of sing-songy things that are very characteristic of female voices. So let's start with our ha. Ha. This is the voice I want to use. And let's try to find a spot where it's not so breathy. Ready? This is the voice I want to use. This is the voice I want to use. Now you try it. This is the voice I want to use. This is the voice I want to use. And it's going to sound very strange at first, but just keep practicing it into the tape recorder until it starts sounding natural. Let's try another one. Ready? This is the voice I want to use. Great. Now, at first it's going to sound very breathy, but that's okay. We're going to overcorrect to breathiness because you can pull it back a little bit. The main thing is to have your voice in that resonance. So a little bit of breathiness is okay. You can take that out later. Ready? Let's try it one more time. This is the voice I want to use. Great. Now just repeat that a few times. Listen back, and we'll move on to the next lesson. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. You've got this sentence that you can say in a female voice reliably. Now we're going to start adding a little bit of inflection to it. Women's voices are more sing-songy than men's. Like, men have a narrower range of notes available to them when they're speaking usually, where women's voices tend to go up and down and all over the place. So we're going to start adding that into our voice now. So I'm going to say our mantra, this is the voice I want to use, over and over again, but with different inflections. And I want you to try to mimic what I'm doing. So turn on your recorder, I'll say it, then you say it, and then listen back and see if you're matching up with what I'm doing. Okay? Here we go. This is the voice I want to use. 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 Very good. So now that you're getting the hang of inflection, we're going to try practicing that even more, because women's voices tend to be much more sing-songy. They tend to have a lot more range in them. So taking our mantra and just saying it as various sentences, try to make it even more sing-songy. So it's like, this is the voice I want to use. This is the voice I want to use. And really try to work your range quite a bit. And listen back to them. There's going to be places where it's going to sound a little odd, and just sort of work on those and try to get them to sound better and better. One really good trick that you can try is kind of talking in a Valley Girl voice, because what it does is it forces you to go up talk at the end, they call it. So when you say, like, this is the voice I want to use, you see how on use I went up like that? If you practice that kind of stuff, it helps you work your way up into your upper register without it sounding so false. So it's an exaggerated, accent, but it's a good practicing thing. And then you can back down from that later, just like our breathiness. Okay, we're really getting some progress here. At this point, you've learned pretty much all of the tips and tricks that I have to offer, but there's a few more exercises that can be really helpful for you. The first one I want to talk about is finding your own little mantras that you can do. I really do recommend that you stick with this is the voice I want to use, but you should also come up with some little sayings that have meaning to you. I wouldn't pick things that are rhyming or verses from songs, because you don't want something with a rhythm to it. You want something that's prose. Like, I'm going to give you a couple of examples that you might use that I really like. This is a quote from Simone de Beauvoir. One is not born a woman, one becomes one. And you can do the same thing that we were doing with this is the voice I want to use. The next one is a quote by Anais Nin that I really like. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. I think both of those are great for our community, and also sort of, uplifting things. So if there's something uplifting that you want to use, go for it. I suggest finding something that's positive if you're going to be saying it over and over again. And it'll help you mentally, and it'll also, just give you another thing that you can practice with. The next thing that you might consider is a longer sort of mantra thing, a series of words that you know by heart, so that you can say them, and then the words eventually kind of, are syllables, but has that longer thing so that you can work on your endurance. For instance, if you're feeling patriotic, you could do the Pledge of Allegiance. Maybe there's some passage from a novel or a short story that you really like. Anything like that. Even a longer quote can be great. Now, you've been using your tape recorder to make all these great advances. What I want you to do now is start to take pieces from the newspaper and just do cold reads. Just read it without ever having looked at it before. Because what this forces you to do is you're concentrating on the words and you're not thinking about your voice. So if you're recording a cold read, you're going to sound exactly how your voice is just naturally going to go. So if you've been practicing enough, by this point, your voice should be just naturally going to your female range. The next thing I want to work on is laughing in a sentence, because one, it's much more feminine if you're sort of smiling and bright when you're speaking. And one of the easiest ways to feminize your voice, once you find your resonance, is to add a little bit of a laughter to it. So we're going to try a couple of different sentences, and I want you to try to incorporate your laugh. Now, laughing is not an easy thing to get down because you probably are going to go into your falsetto. And the other tricky thing is that a laugh is an involuntary response. So you have to condition yourself to laugh in a female manner. So you might need to go practice that on your own. Let me kind of show you how I laugh, and then we will try it in a sentence, okay? So when I'm laughing at the end of a sentence, what I kind of do is this sort of and it sounds kind of funny by itself, but it lilts up at the end. So it's and that at the end that goes up into falsetto is actually what makes it seem very female. Another thing that you can do is laugh at the beginning of a sentence. So you kind of start off with a and all of these sort of laughters are very feminine cues to people in conversations. So if you smile a lot and laugh and seem engaging, it's gonna help you a great deal in terms of getting acceptance from people, not just for a female voice, but just they'll be more interested in hanging out with you and speaking with you. So just try a few different kinds of laughs, and just work on getting your own laugh to where it's a natural sounding thing. You get the idea. So just practice that into your tape recorder and see what happens. Okay, now that you've practiced that a little bit, we're going to add our laughter into our sentence. So here we go. I'm going to just do a few and just to sort of, add it wherever you can. I'm going to do one at the end first. This is the voice I want to use. Great. Now let me try one at the beginning. This is the voice I want to use. Now I'm going to try one in the middle. This is the voice I want to use. Great. See, it's very easy. Just work on incorporating that into your speech patterns, and it's going to seem much more feminine, and it's going to be, just much more friendly too. So it'll serve you doubly. Another real stress test of our voices is coughing. And this is something that really takes some control, and will probably take you some time to get used to. Because again, like laughter, coughing is an involuntary response. So you kind of have to find a way that if a cough catches you off guard, that you can sort of save yourself by bringing it up into female range at the end. So what you should start with is a very soft little cough, like this. And see how that sounds really high-pitched? That's where you want to kind of end any cough that catches you off guard. So even if it starts off like this, it's like you can almost bring yourself back around. So let's try a few more. See how it starts sounding really masculine at the beginning, and you've just got to try to stop yourself from doing that. So instead of going, you're going to go, and try to clear your throat that way and get whatever's in your chest out that way. If you're not in a situation where you have people who you can see face to face and interact with, another thing that can be really helpful is to have your recorder by the phone and just make phone calls to retailers and just see what happens. It's a great way to sort of test your day-to-day voice, and it gets you used to talking to people so that you're not so nervous about it. The nice thing about doing it over the phone too is you don't have to deal with, a face-to-face kind of thing yet. So what I recommend is just call local retailers and just say, call a restaurant and say, hi, how late are you open? What's your soup today? What's the special of the day? And just ask them some questions so that you can get used to getting your cadence and your voice down. And be sure to record all of this so that you can listen back and see how you did. Another thing you can do is call 800 numbers and ask questions about products. How does this work? What do I need to do to order it? That kind of thing. You can also call and get mail order catalogs. That can be helpful because you're giving them a lot of information about yourself. So I recommend all of those as ways that you can get some practice with real people in real situations. The interesting thing about the phone is that is the purest form of voice passing. It's like if you don't pass on the phone when you're speaking with someone, then your voice isn't there yet, because all they have to go on is your voice. So if your voice is good, that's when you start knowing that it's really coming together. Now then, you've been practicing for a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, and it's starting to sound pretty good. You're really excited. It sounds great on your recorder. So now it's time to start testing it with real people. Now this is where it gets tricky. Some people aren't in situations where they can, divulge this stuff to friends. If you have that situation, that's great. The only trick is make sure that your friends are going to give you an honest opinion, because there's a lot of people who will say, oh, you sound great, even though you don't. And they're trying not to hurt your feelings and they're trying to be encouraging, but in the end that doesn't help you. So it's really important, if you're going to do that, to have these conversations with people that you're recording, just day-to-day conversations, talk about the weather or whatever, and record it so that you can see how your voice is working in a real-life situation. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is sort of mannerisms and that sort of stuff. Now, I think in general, people overestimate that kind of stuff can help you. If your voice isn't in female range, it doesn't matter if you're waving your hands around or smiling or using your eyebrows. You really have to start from the base of our sort of vocal bedrock that we've been working on. However, there are certain things that you can do that will help you pass. One is to be very engaged when you're speaking with people. Look them in the eye, smile a lot, listen carefully and respond in a way that seems, caring and interested, and people will pick up on that, and it'll feel very feminine to them, even if they're not thinking of it that way. Another thing is to use your hands a lot. You don't want to go overboard because that can seem flamboyant, but women tend to use their hands a lot more when they're speaking. So if it seems right, use your hands. Don't sit on them. In my own case, I actually for years had to kind of hold my hands down because my tendency was to speak like this. So it's nice finally to sort of feel free to use my hands. Another thing is eyebrows. If when you're speaking, just be sure to use a lot of facial expressions, and use your face a lot to sort of convey the emotion of what you're saying. It's a much more feminine thing to do, to really emphasize the sing-songiness of your voice, as well as sort of portray the emotion you're trying to convey with your face. So we're getting really close. Right now, you've got your real world exercises down. Things are coming along great, but there's still a few more things that are going to come up that you really should work on. We're going to cover those in the advanced exercises. Another thing that can be really helpful, but you have to do it kind of carefully and make sure that you're not getting into your falsetto range, is singing along with female singers who are in your voice range. That requires picking specific singers and especially specific songs, because if they get above notes that you can sing, then you're going to go into your falsetto, and that's not going to help you. It's actually going to hinder you by teaching you bad habits. So try to pick people who have a very low voice. In my own case, I found Katie Lang to be very helpful, or Sean Colvin, or Fiona Apple, or Madonna. A friend of mine really liked using Tori Amos as her sort of vocal role model. You might also consider listening to personalities on the radio who you like. Now you have to be careful there too, because a lot of women on radio have very deep, resonant voices. So don't take a role model that has a voice that's too low for you. Try to find somebody who might have, some stuff that you can record off the radio, and then try to emulate their inflection and their style. So you remember in exercise 16 when we were working on trying to find our break? What I want you to do is work at or just above your break and try to work on improving your range, because if you can get your break to be a little bit higher, that just gives you a little more room to play with your sing-songiness, so that it doesn't sound so pinched and false when you're doing it. So practice that, listen to it, see what happens. Okay, this next thing, we're going to go back to talking about falsetto a little bit. Now I know earlier I said falsetto's a bad thing, but it's not always a bad thing now that you're at the advanced exercises. Women tend to go up into their falsettos, sometimes at the beginning or ends of sentences, sometimes in the middle. It just depends on their inflection. If you listen to the next couple of sentences I do, I think you'll see what I'm saying. It's almost what we were talking about with Valley Girl talk before. So if I say, are you going to go to the party? Do you hear how party goes up into my falsetto? Party. What you want to try to do is get that so that it doesn't sound creaky or forced. And it takes a little bit of practice to figure out how to lilt it up to that point or bring it back down. And so you can try to do it by going up, and you can try doing it by coming down from it. So let's try going up first. I'll use party as a word. Ready? Party. 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 Now let's try another sentence. Have you ever seen such a cute baby? Have you ever seen such a cute baby? Great. Another common word you're going to need to be able to do this falsetto trick with is the word high, because you use it at the beginning of a sentence, so you're going to be starting your voice with this sort of strange falsetto thing sometimes. So you go, hi. Do you hear how I started in my falsetto and then came back down into my regular register? So you try that a few times and record these. Ready? Hi. 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 And then try it the other direction. Hi. Hi. And you'll notice like that last one was a little croaky. It'll take you a while to find your point, but if you do it long enough, eventually it'll feel second nature. Okay, this next one is a real toughie, and that's speaking in a place where it's difficult to hear you. Maybe it's a loud bar, or maybe it's a loud workplace. What's going to happen with your voice is the breathiness is going to drop out, and it's going to become more pinched. So if you're trying to talk really loud, see how it starts to get pinched? What you want to try to do is get so that you're not doing that as much. And the main things you can do is make sure that you're supporting your breath by a big long breath, shoulders back, work on your resonance, that your mouth is open. Those two things alone will increase your resonance greatly. The other thing that you want to do is keep your throat relaxed, and that's easier said than done. Try not to yell across a room, try to lean into people and tell them things, but you just have to keep practicing, because what happens is those muscles will get stronger if you do some exercises where you're using a louder voice. The first one I want you to try is setting up your tape recorder across the room and then turning it on and going back and then sort of yelling across the room as if you're trying to get someone to come to you. And try it at different volumes and see if your voice character is changing and if it sounds different in any way, if it's getting too pinched or if it's difficult to hear on the tape. The next thing I want you to do is actually take your tape recorder outside, set it up, across the yard, or take it to a park and set it up and, walk 20, 50 feet away and just yell and see how your voice carries. It's very difficult at first, and it's something that you'll have to work on, but it is important, especially if you're ever going to be giving speeches or, going to clubs a lot. You're going to need to work on that kind of voice. So in addition to your strength of your voice, you also want to work on your stamina. You want to see if you can talk for long periods of time without dropping out of your new voice. So what I want you to do for this is get on the phone with somebody who you can just talk forever with, a relative or friend, and every now and then just record yourself, like set a timer, and every 3 or 5 minutes just record a little bit of yourself. And don't listen to it then, but just listen to it after you get done with the phone conversation. And see if there's any difference from beginning to end in the way your voice sounds. What you want to be able to do is obviously keep it sounding the same all the way through. The next thing I want you to try is have someone over, have drinks or dinner or coffee or whatever, and just have a long conversation. But what I want you to do is have them record you without your knowing, just little 10-second bits every 3 to 5 minutes. And after they leave, take a listen, see if there's anything unusual about your voice or if it's dropping out at certain points in the evening. So what that'll do is just help you get it so that it feels consistent all the time, because it's a little disconcerting for people if you come into work and you have this great voice, but by the end of the day it's kind of strange sounding. So it just takes some time, but it is important. Okay, this last one is a real toughie because it's kind of a involuntary thing. You have to be able to wake up and find your voice right away. Maybe there's somebody in bed with you, or maybe the phone rings. You want to be able to find your voice immediately, even if you're a little groggy. And that just takes some practice. So what I want you to do is have your tape recorder by the bed, and when your alarm clock goes off, right off the bat, I want you to grab that and just say, this is the voice I want to use, and then just say a few other things. If you remember a dream, or if there's some other little comment about what's going through your mind, just record that and see how it sounds. It's really important that the very first thing that comes out of your mouth sounds female. So really concentrate on being able to hit that note just from memory, and you'll go a long ways. Quickly, I just want to, now that we're done with our exercises, go through a couple of common questions that I get. One is, people ask me, my voice sounds so strange, when I'm talking, what's the problem? Am I doing something wrong? And the answer is yes, you are doing something wrong. You shouldn't be listening to yourself as you speak, because the voice that you hear sort of echoing around in your head is very different than what people are hearing away from you. So you want to just be talking by feel. That's why all these exercises have been about feel. The time to hear is when you've recorded it, because that's the only real gauge of hearing. Your ear is going to trick you if you're listening while you speak. So you got to get to where you're not conscious of how you sound when you're speaking. You're just feeling it like it's just a muscle memory kind of thing. Sometimes people ask me, they'll say, my friends all say I sound fine, but I'm still getting clocked all the time. What's going on? And unfortunately, sometimes well-meaning friends will say things to you to be encouraging or not to hurt your feelings that aren't really doing you any favors as far as getting your voice right. So even though your friends may mean well, the real trick is to find people who will either give you an honest opinion or learn to figure it out yourself from your tape recorder. That's the only way that you're going to improve. People telling you sound great, if you don't, isn't going to help you. So ask people to be honest and tell you what they think. Sometimes people ask, I'm already full-time, should I just start with this new voice? That seems really strange. And the answer is yes. I know it sounds hard and you might be a little nervous about doing it, but you have to kind of think of it like a foreign language. The only way that you're going to learn is, if you want to learn French, the best way to do it is just to go to France and just start trying to speak it. And you're going to mess things up every now and then, and that's fine. To be honest, attempt at a passing voice is better than a non-passing voice you're using now. The last question I get a lot is people will say, I've listened to your tape, I've done other things that I've read and heard, and I just seem to have some kind of mental block, what am I doing wrong? And if after doing these exercises you still feel like you're not getting it, what I would recommend is going and getting some professional speech therapy from somebody who's licensed. If you'd like, I'm also offering phone consultations. You can give me a call. There's pricing and stuff like that in the booklet I sent you. And either way, I think that there's a point where you really do need some one-on-one help if you're not getting it at this point. And that doesn't mean that you won't get it. It just means that it's going to take a little bit more effort. But I know you can do it, so let's go. Wow, here we are, the end of the tape. And I'm so glad that you listened all the way through. And I really hope that you'll go back and do these lessons over and over, because it's only through repetition and practice that this is going to come together. So get out there, record your voice, listen, really try to get a feel for it. It'll take a while, but I know you can do it. If there's anything you had questions about on this, or if you thought this was great, if you wish there were more information about certain things, let me know. It's the only way that I can improve these kind of projects. And I also wanted to let you know that if you'd like, I am available for phone consultations. And you can contact me through my website, tsroadmap.com, if you're interested in one-on-one tutoring. I just wanted to wish you best of luck. I hope this little roadmap has helped you on your journey, and I hope it takes you one step closer to even greater happiness. Bye now. just want to say a quick thing about the appendices that are added to this with the keyboard. I've included these because what can be really helpful is to actually have your pitch recorded onto your microcassette recorder at the very beginning, like 5-10 seconds of your actual pitch, so that you have that always as a reference, so that you can just play it and then start recording immediately with your note in mind. Okay, I'm just going to play the A, that's average female range, just so you have this as a reference. This is A. Okay, the next one is middle C, and we're going to try to use that for our exercises. Okay, this appendix is going to help you find pitch, and I'm just going to play notes that are only in our female range. So I'm going to start and I'll say the note, then I'll play the note, I'll pause for a minute, and then I'll go to the next one. And what you can do is actually record these onto your microcassette recorder as a reference guide. Ready? This is F. This is G. This is A. This is B. This is middle C. This is D. This is E. This is F. This is G. This is A. This is B. And this is C. So we're just going to do this a few times, so let's just take a sip and gargle along with me. Ready?